Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. I'm joined this evening by two of our favourite guests. On this side of me, we've got Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. And on this side of me, we've got Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. And how are we both this evening?
Great, thank you. How about you, Kenny?
Excellent. Well, we start tonight with our coronavirus update, of course, and as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there has been a total of 41,699 coronavirus tests concluded. Of these, 33,027 were confirmed negative, 8,672 tests were positive. 166 patients were in intensive care last night, with 159 of those having tested positive. This is an increase of 263 confirmed cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the COVID-19 infection has sadly risen to 9,815. The latest UK daily figures available show 17,337 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from the illness. A total of 397,670 people have been tested, of which 268,626 were negative and 129,044 were confirmed positive. The Office of National Statistics also published new figures today, suggesting that the total number of coronavirus-related deaths in the UK may now be as high as 23,000. The data covering the period up to the 10th of April records 13,121 deaths in England and Wales with COVID-19 as a factor, compared to the UK government's running total of 9,288 on that day. The ONS figures, which are comparable to Scotland's NRS figures to be published tomorrow, includes all deaths where COVID-19 is listed on the death certificate, including those in care homes and community settings. Daily figures only include those who have died in hospital having had a positive test for the infection. If the gap between the daily figures and the ONS figures has not changed in the time since then, the UK may already have seen more than 23,000 deaths. This is clearly higher than the 20,000 deaths that NHS England Medical Director Stephen Powis said would be a good result for the UK. At her briefing this afternoon, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon today pledged that she would do whatever was best for Scotland to manage and recover from the coronavirus epidemic, and would not stay tied to the so-called Four Nations strategy if she felt it was not the right thing for Scotland. We have a short clip about that.
I'm going to Kenny McBride from Broadcasting Scotland.
Hello? Yes, thank you, First Minister. Given the Sunday Times article this week, which was so scathing about Boris Johnson's complacency in the face of the pandemic, do you now think that the Four Nations approach was a mistake for Scotland? And was your decision to pursue that approach affected in any way by the media in Scotland, who, for example, this week have seen fit to declare the case for independence dead, even as we've learned that the decisions made by the UK government to ignore WHO advice may have cost hundreds, if not thousands, of lives?
No, I don't think it was a mistake, and no, it wasn't driven by the media in any way. I mean, I'll refer back to an answer I gave a moment ago, and this may or may not disappoint anybody who wants to try to make the very traumatic situation we're living through right now, and I mean traumatic in a health sense, an economic sense, an emotional sense for people, to try to reduce that to politics. I don't really have space in my head or my day right now to do anything other than try to navigate the best way forward for the country to get us in as good a way through this crisis as I possibly can, and that's what I'll continue to focus on. Trying to do things in a Four Nations way, given the geography of the Four Nations and three of those nations in particular, seems to me to make sense. This is a virus. It doesn't respect borders or boundaries, and you see people moving freely across the Four Nations. So it makes sense that if we are to be as effective as possible in combating this virus, we've got to align our activity as much as possible. And of course, some of the decisions about how we manage the impact of this, the quantity of economic and business support, given that borrowing power still lie with the UK government, demands and rests on decisions that are taken there. But that said, I will never be a prisoner of that if something different is required for Scotland. And we have taken different decisions on some issues where we thought that was necessary. We decided to move away from mass gatherings a bit earlier. We announced the closure of schools a little bit earlier. The lockdown, when it came earlier in the spread of the infection in Scotland. And of course, we are taking a slightly tougher approach when it comes to business closure. Construction, for example, being an example of that, where we are saying to non-essential construction sites that they should be closed where there is different advice elsewhere. So we will take the decision. I will take the decisions I think are right for Scotland. So I go back. This is where I go back to my earlier answer. I'm not going to not do what is right for Scotland because I want to stay in a four nations approach, although I think the importance of aligning is obvious for the reasons I've given. But nor am I going to come at this from the perspective of saying I must do something different for Scotland for the sake of it, if that is not the right thing to do. So I am going to continue just now trying to do the right things and reach the right judgments about how we save lives in Scotland, protect our NHS and suppress this virus. And over the coming weeks, make the judgments about how we do all of that with restoring as much normality to life as possible. And I will be driven by what I judge, with all the advice and the evidence that I have access to, by what I judge to be in the best interest of the people I serve, which is the people of Scotland. But it will not be a traditional political calculation. It will be a calculation and a judgment driven by protecting the people of Scotland from this massive public health emergency. Tom Eden from P.
The First Minister also stressed that she would not put purely economic calculations before saving lives. She commented, "I think it's wrong and potentially quite dangerous to see this as a trade-off between health and saving lives on one hand and protecting the economy on the other. The only firm, solid basis for a sustainable economic recovery is a population that is not facing the threat of a rampaging virus. While we understand the deep damage of the lockdown measures on our economy, it is equally true to say that if we come out of lockdown early, and if that results in a resurgence of the virus and a necessity then to reimpose lockdown measures, perhaps impose even stricter measures, the damage that will do to the economy is potentially even greater." And coming to you first, Chris, what did you make of the First Minister's responses today?
I thought they were fantastic, and I thought equally the question was very pertinent and actually quite refreshing that it wasn't a question which is daily churned out by the normal media attendees. So first of all, fair play to you, Kenny, for asking it. And the 2 points that I took out from this, the first one being is the fact that Nicola reiterated the fact that she will not be a prisoner of the four-nation approach. And she qualified that by citing that the Scottish Government has done things differently and done things earlier in some respects. For argument's sake, the closure of pubs and restaurants. And even going that one step further, the closure of building sites. But for me, the tail end of Nicola's reply to you was that she will do everything, not on a political platform, but for the people of Scotland.
Yeah. And Sam, this caused a wee bit of a stooshy on social media today. We had a journalist from the Scotsman, Paris Goutsoyanis, I believe his name is, commenting that this was an outrage that Broadcasting Scotland had been allowed to ask a question. We were accused of being a partisan hobby blog. What did you make of the First Minister's comments and the stooshy that kicked up afterwards?
Oh no, Kenny, you're trusting me to answer that. First of all, I welcomed Nicola Sturgeon's comments. They were comments from someone who is a leader and is taking a nation through a crisis. And as she basically agree with everything that Chris has said, and I was talking to my neighbours over the garden fence, social distancing, I may add, who are very much for the political union and they don't agree with an independent Scotland. We have quite a lot of interesting conversations. And this afternoon, after Nicola's briefing, they were very complimentary of Nicola Sturgeon, and they were very complimentary of her role in this and her leadership skills. And they were saying that basically they would like her to be leader of the UK. You know, they still don't agree with an independent Scotland, but they agree. And Nicola's comments were correct. She's not kind of going to be held hostage in this four nation scenario, but at the end of the day, the people of Scotland are her main concern, which is correct. And that's the comments of a leader, and that's who we want to get us through this. Regarding the kind of stushy on social media this afternoon, I find that quite hilarious. I just thought, oh, bless the poor soul. Is that, you've got all this big crisis going on. There's people losing their lives. It is absolutely heartbreaking what's happening right now. And there's lots more things happening in the UK and the four nations regarding PPE and things like that. And he complains about an independent broadcaster getting to ask a question at the First Minister's briefing. At the end of the day, regarding whether we're hobbyists or amateurs or whatever way it was, at the end of the day, we still have a right to, and you done wonderful, Kenny. I was watching it and I was well proud. I was like, yeah! I just think, oh, really, that's the best you can come up with. And at the end of the day, that just shows you what Scotland stands for. That at the end of the day, we're all treated as equals, and we all have the right to ask our First Minister questions at this important time. I mean, it's not like down in Downing Street where, there's only a select few that seem to get to ask the questions every day. And that just goes to show you the difference in the two countries and how they are ran. That's the kind of, I just thought it was a bit kind of, childish and a bit,
on the point that we are a partisan hobby blog, I would just like to say, first of all, we're not a blog, we're a broadcaster. Secondly, we are partisan only in the sense that we give a voice to a section of Scottish society that doesn't get very clearly articulated in much of the rest of the media, especially the broadcast media, which predominantly takes a London-centric attitude to the UK and therefore doesn't ever consider things with Scotland as the first concern. And thirdly, as far as being partisan, or this question itself being partisan, I would simply direct anybody who thinks so to an article in the Herald today, which I don't think anyone would describe as a wildly pro-independence publication, where Neil Mackay has written an article basically saying Nicola Sturgeon should cut Scotland loose from Boris Johnson and his failed government and its failed COVID-19 strategy right now. She can't wait. Lives depend on it. And this is something that other journalists in respectable, regulated media are making points about, and we felt it was an important question to ask because it is about putting Scotland first, and that I felt was important. On the question of regulation, I would also just say Broadcasting Scotland would welcome regulation as a broadcaster. The only problem is that at the moment, internet regulation is not something that Ofcom is able to do, even though technically it does have responsibility for it. So I hope that answers any questions on that side of things that people have. We are hoping to be present at the briefings regularly from now on. It's been difficult for us for a variety of reasons up until now, but we are hoping to be asking questions regularly now, and we will continue to do the same thing. We will ask the questions that we believe matter to the people of Scotland, and that's what Broadcasting Scotland is all about. Moving on, though, to Westminster, where the SNP has demanded answers from the UK government over its failure to join a Europe-wide PPE procurement scheme, after one of the UK's most senior civil servants stated it was a political decision for the UK not to be part of the programme to secure vital equipment for frontline staff. During an evidence session for the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Sir Simon MacDonald, was asked why the UK did not take part in the PPE procurement scheme. He replied, "It was a political decision. The mission briefed ministers about what was available, what was on offer, and the decision is known." It was reported earlier that the UK missed 3 opportunities to bulk buy PPE for medical staff and healthcare workers, with the UK government stating it was only aware after the tenders had been put out. Alan Smith MP, the SNP's shadow foreign affairs spokesperson, said, "The revelation that this was a political decision by the UK government rather than a logistical error that prevented the UK from securing vital PPE supplies for our frontline staff tackling the coronavirus pandemic is damning. It's clear that UK government ministers were briefed about the Europe-wide scheme but chose to reject vital protective equipment due to its narrow Brexit ideology. Quite simply, it would be unacceptable if anyone has decided to put politics before the urgent need to save people's lives. Governments across the UK have a duty to work together and with international partners to tackle the pandemic effectively. The UK government must now urgently explain why it took a political decision to reject vital PPE supplies." And before I go to either of our guests, I should point out that just before we came on air, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office did issue a statement saying that this wasn't true, but clearly that's a story that will develop as the evening and tomorrow roll on. And Chris, coming to you first then, what do you make of this comment from Simon MacDonald, assuming for now that it is true?
That aside, actually, I was wanting to highlight the fact that the British government's ineptitude to procure PPE for the whole of its country, and can I stress that point, its country. And that includes Wales, Northern Ireland, as well as our good selves, has been woeful to say the least. And they're not just being contradicted by their own people, they're now being contradicted by eminent journalists and morning sofa sitters such as Piers Morgan. That you would never think that Piers Morgan would attack his lovely Tory party colleagues and friends, but he highlighted the fact that the government came out and said, well, we've secured the PPE from Turkey, and this was turned out not to be true, but then it turned out to be true. But Turkey had already claimed the PPE was en route before the UK government had asked for it. In stark contrast to the fact that our Trade Minister Ivan McKee made obviously a couple of calls, a couple of emails to China, and lo and behold, PPE arrived on the shores of Scotland at Prestwick Airport at the weekend. So the harsh reality of it is that, and actually I have to augment what the First Minister said today, and I offer this in a conciliatory point of view to the UK government. Nobody is going to get it right 100% all of the time on this, and people are going to slip up and drop the ball, but I heard one of the people from the UK government today, one of the cohorts that were at the briefing, and he was saying that we're not comparing apples and pears. We're not comparing apples and oranges. We're comparing apples and pears. And I just thought, what are you on?
Yeah,
that's apples and oranges, apples and pears. Can we not just talk about PPE for Christ's sake and just get to the crux of the matter?
Yeah. And Sam, what do you think about this? Clearly, at the very least, the UK government has not been 100% honest about certain things. We've talked before about the problem that arose where Public Health England had reportedly told suppliers not to sell to Scotland and Wales. As Chris mentioned, the supplies that were supposedly coming from Turkey before Turkey had even actually received the order. And now this confusion, at least, over whether the decision not to participate in the Europe-wide procurement scheme was a slip-up, a missed email, or if it was a conscious political decision. What do you make of the communications coming out of the Westminster government?
Right now, coming out of the Westminster government, my feelings are they're acting like children. That's going to be the safest word I can use right now. No offence to any children, because children have got a lot more sense. They are, honestly, it is absolutely mind-boggling that they think that it's like he says, she says, he says, she says, and and as Chris says, we are at this moment in time in extraordinary circumstances. Nobody's going to get it right. There is going to be mistakes. These things, we as adults, we accept that there is going to be mistakes. But at this moment in time, the amount of mistakes and the amount of he says, she says, he says, she says, we sent an email, we didn't send an email, the email was missed. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's unacceptable. That's not how a government behaves. That's not how leadership behaves, and it's not how grown adults behave. And I just find them, I just look at it and I just listen to the briefings and I listen to what they're saying and I think, oh my goodness, and yous are running the UK. Mm-hmm. It's just, they've got no leadership, they just seem to have no leadership qualities, they have no management skills, no responsibility skills either, just the basic things. Even just for being an adult, being an adult in everyday world, you need to take responsibility for your actions, you need to make tough decisions, and they just don't seem to be able to do this. And I just find that it is ludicrous. We're living in a twilight zone with this lot right now. They are, and that's what scares me. And it does scare me that that these people are just, they're let loose. They're let loose. They really are, and they're just. They're not behaving like adults. It's at the time they actually grew up and started behaving like adults. And I would love to bang their heads together and say, what are you doing? What exactly are you actually doing? Are you taking any of this serious? Because at this moment, they're still not taking this serious.
Yeah.
We will. I've had my rant.
Yeah, we will obviously continue to monitor that story. As I said, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has denied the story, so we will, I'm sure, report on this again soon. But we move on now back to Scotland, where the economic impact of the efforts to tackle the coronavirus pandemic could see gross domestic product fall by around a third, according to a report by the chief economist. The latest State of the Economy report, published by the Scottish Government's chief economist Gary Gillespie, presents analysis showing that GDP in Scotland could fall by around a third during the current period of social distancing, similar to estimates from the UK and international bodies such as the Office for Budget Responsibility and the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. Alongside a summary of latest economic developments, the report includes Scottish Government analysis of channels through which COVID-19 is impacting the economy, short-term impact of social distancing on GDP and the labour market, exposure of different sectors to COVID-19 risks, and the medium-term path of economic recovery. Economy Secretary Fiona Hislop said, "Our response to COVID-19 is saving lives, but I am deeply aware that the pandemic is having an economic effect that's already being felt across Scotland. The Scottish Government is doing everything we can to support businesses at this very difficult time. We want Scotland to recover as quickly as possible from this outbreak, and that includes rebuilding our economy as quickly as is safely possible. None of us should be under any illusions about the scale of economic recovery, and as we have said before, no government will have all of those answers. That's why we've set up an independent advisory group to provide expert economic advice, and this will be crucial to help us deal with the challenges of rebuilding our economy." And Sam, coming to you first, this clearly, we all knew that the economy was going to take a big hit. Most businesses now are either shut down or operating at significantly reduced capacity. What do you think about this? The fact that GDP has is now projected to fall by about a third as a result of the crisis.
I think your head would be in the clouds if you thought it wasn't going to fall. I think anyone, it was only common sense. It's going to fall. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes about that. The economy is going to take a hit right now because there's no money moving around, from shops to shops and services and things like that. And people are on reduced wages and living in reduced incomes right now. So, yeah, it was going to take a hit. My concern would be when we're coming out of this and getting the economy restarted again, because we need to kind of start looking at ways of how the economy is going to recover. One thing about Scotland is we're quite innovative, and I mean, but we can't be under any illusions. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take time. We're not just going to bounce out of it in a week or two or even a month. It's going to take a lot of work, and I don't know. I'm not an economic analyst or professor or anything like that. So yeah, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take everybody to kind of pull together and kind of come out of this. Sure. Time will tell. That's the best answer I can give, Kenny, sure, from how I'm seeing it right now.
Yep. And Chris, I'm sure you'll be somewhat concerned about some of the people being asked to advise on this economic recovery. We're seeing some pretty hardcore capitalists in there. What would you like to see built into this economic recovery? We've heard the First Minister talk about wanting to build back a better economy, a greener economy, a more just economy. What would you like to see when we start trying to dig ourselves out of this hole?
What we have here, Kenny, is we have got a platform to re-establish Scotland's economy, and in order to do that, bearing in mind the figures from the OBR with regards Scotland's GDP being decreased by a third. What I would see the stimulus that is required is quite clearly where capitalism has failed. We need to turn to socialism, and with that socialism, I would like the Scottish Government to introduce a national living wage for everyone, which would encompass people who are on benefits, people who are working as unpaid carers, people who are still below the national minimum wage, and get that liquidity thrown through the communities, because right at this moment in time, with the extreme measures that we have in every community in and around Scotland, we are being constantly reminded, where possible, if we can pay for goods and services contactless. So there is no hard cash running around. I have not had any change in my pocket for about nearly 2 months now. And I've got a tin sitting in the kitchen that I throw my change into, and I can then delve into it if I need to get on the bus, or if I need to, buy a packet of cigarettes. I know that doesn't go well with the whole COVID chat, but getting back to the communities, and communities need money, cash money, hard cash money, to circulate around and get the liquidity moving. This can be done. This can be done whilst adhering to the social distancing and the correct usage of personal protection equipment. I noticed the other day there my bins were emptied in East Renfrewshire, and the 3 binmen that jumped out of the cab were all suited and booted. So 3 people can work together wearing personal protection equipment. The point has been made before that there will be no easing off of the social distancing that we have practiced so far, and that will continue long into the autumn and possibly into the winter. So we need to try and, as companies eventually open up again, they will need to nuance their business to make sure that they are practicing that social distancing, be competent in the usage and the wearing of personal protection equipment, and get liquidity back into our communities again. And the one way to do that is through a universal income.
Yeah. Well, moving on now. Between December 2019 and February 2020, Scotland's employment rate estimate rose over the quarter to 75.4%, remaining close to the highest on record. The unemployment rate estimate fell over the quarter to 3.7%, also close to a record low. Commenting on these labour market statistics updates released by the ONS for that quarter, Business Minister Jamie Hepburn said, "These statistics do not capture the impact of COVID-19 on our labour market, since they predate social distancing measures and the policies put in place to help mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the Scottish economy. Our total support for Scottish business currently stands at £2.3 billion, and we will continue to do everything we can to support employers and employees at this time of unprecedented disruption to our society, economy and labour market. Our response to coronavirus is saving lives, however. We are acutely aware that the impact of these unprecedented but unnecessary measures is felt throughout the economy. Throughout this period, we are working to protect productive capacity to support the economy and employment to recover quickly when these measures are lifted. We will continue to work closely with the business sector and our partners to identify what further support is needed. I encourage firms to check online HMRC guidance on how to claim for the cost of employees' wages through the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, which was opened for applications yesterday." And Sam, clearly, these statistics don't tell us very much about what's happening right now, but it does show that in some respects, at least, the Scottish economy was not doing badly before this crisis hit. How again, speaking about the kind of employment, though, a lot of these jobs that people had were 0-hour contracts, they're temporary jobs, gig economy type jobs. Do you think as we come out of the crisis, we can look at maybe changing some of that part of our economy?
I think there'll be, coming out of the crisis, it's going to be difficult because obviously we're going to have to carry on social distancing for probably quite a while, as Chris was saying. For people that are 0-hour contracts, this might be our opportunity to get rid of 0-hour contracts because it gives people no security whatsoever. Down my neck of the woods or up my neck of the woods, depending where you live, a lot of our industry is hospitality and tourism, and that is going to take a big hit, and it's took a huge hit because everything's all closed, and a lot of people have lost their jobs, and seasonal workers as well, because a lot of these hospitality tourism jobs are seasonal. They're not on all year round, so we need to kind of have a look at that, and that was one of the things about our campaign, We Save Lost Moment. Bringing in more seasonal jobs, more seasonal contracts, wasn't going to do our area any good whatsoever. We need more sustainable jobs, and maybe we need to this will give us the opportunity to look at more sustainable jobs within the hospitality industry and the tourist industry, whether looking more towards ecotourism as well. Again, it's going to be a challenge because we're going to have to look at it in a way towards social distancing and how this virus is going to pan out, so to speak. Are we going to be able to completely eradicate it, or is it going to be one of these things we're going to have to do social distancing for a long time and along with vaccinations? This is not something that's going to be over quite quickly, but there is certainly a big chunk of the industries out there, hospitality, tourism, gigs, entertainment, various self-employed like the arts and crafts and things like that, who are really taking a hit right now.
Yeah.
A lot of arts and crafts have managed to move online. A lot of the gigs and entertainments managed to move online. But obviously your tourism and hospitality, they can't really adapt to that.
Yeah.
So it's having to deal with that as well.
Yeah, and of course coming into the summer, that's only going to grow as a problem. Moving on though, Economy Secretary Fiona Hislop has confirmed that grant funding for the newly self-employed suffering hardship and SMEs in distress will be available in the coming days. The £100 million fund to support the self-employed and SMEs announced last week will be broken into 3 separate funds as follows. £34 million for the newly self-employed hardship fund, managed by local authorities, will be allocated to the newly self-employed facing hardship through £2,000 grants. £20 million Creative Tourism and Hospitality Enterprises Hardship Fund, managed by the enterprise agencies in partnership with Creative Scotland and Visit Scotland, for creative, tourism and hospitality companies not in receipt of business rates relief. And £45 million Pivotal Enterprise Resilience Fund, managed by the enterprise agencies for vulnerable SME firms who are vital to the local or national economic foundations of Scotland. The Scottish Government is also providing £1 million to top up Creative Scotland's bridging bursaries in the not-for-profit sector. Speaking in Parliament, Ms Hislop also confirmed that the grant funding will be open for applications by the end of April and that recipients will receive funds in early May. And Chris, clearly some of this affects the industries that Sam was just talking about. On a slightly wider point though, clearly the Scottish Government doesn't have direct control over its own budget. It can't necessarily shell out money until it's had confirmation of what it's going to receive in Barnett consequentials. What do you think about the support that's been provided and maybe some of the criticism that's been thrown at the Scottish Government for not providing exactly the same support in exactly the same way as the UK Government has down south?
Well, Kenny, you are an absolute mind reader, which is a quintessential skill that every good interviewer needs.
Oh, well, thank you.
And Sam outlined it quite excellently. The various jobs and various industries that definitely need support. But what the point that I was trying to make, or was wanting to make, was that irrespective of the Barnett consequentials that come from down south to help with the tackling COVID-19, which they are welcome and obviously proportionate, we would all like to hope. I have to point out that the Scottish Government are actually putting in extra money from our own reserves where it's required. And I'm actually hopeful that today's earlier on Sturgeon between the Scotsman and all the rest of it has brought on a couple of extra, possibly, soft no voters, soft yes voters who are tuning in for the first time. That they need to understand that we're not just spending the money that is given to us in Barnett consequentials. The Scottish Government are actually adding money from the Scotland's reserves from the budget that was passed quite excellently by Kate Forbes. There's always a contingency sort of like fund, kind of like, dare I use the word, slushing around, that the Scottish Government can dip into. It's certainly not in the realms of stuffing your hands down the back of the sofa, when you're trying to throw money at something. But the Scottish Government have been, delivered a responsible budget that they can access extra money in order to support the various councils around the country. And that will go a long way. You only need to have a look at the amount of money that has been pumped into setting up the NHS Louisa Jordan. Now, if you think for just a second the amount of money that took in order to set that facility up in the hope that we don't use it, what about the amount of money that we pour into weapons of mass destruction in the hope that we'll never use it, because we never will use it? So look at that extra money that could be pumped into Scotland's economy right now if we just knock this stupid farce on the head and, get away from these vanity projects of HS2 and Hinkley Point and all the rest of it. Our country could do so much better if we had access to the money that we actually need.
Yeah, well, there's the socialist rant for the evening. Moving on, though. Household claims for universal credit in Scotland have increased from an average of 20,000 per month in 2019 to over 110,000 between the 1st of March and the 7th of April, highlighting the impact the pandemic is having on people's finances. In response, the Scottish Government, in partnership with the Citizens Advice Network, is launching a new campaign to raise awareness of the financial support available to people. The campaign will provide information and advice on issues including rent and mortgage payments, energy bills, council tax, and benefits that people may be entitled to. People will be able to access this advice online, by phone, or by contacting their local Citizens Advice Bureau. Cabinet Secretary for Social Security, Shirley-Anne Somerville, said, "This huge increase in claims for universal credit demonstrates just how many people across the country are struggling financially due to the coronavirus pandemic. These are difficult and worrying times for everyone, with many people requiring financial support for the first time, and even more pressure on those who were already struggling to make ends meet. It is welcome that people are claiming the support that they are entitled to from the DWP, and I would encourage people to look into what additional help is available. Even if you're not entitled to universal credit, there could be other assistance that you can access, so it is worth checking." That's why we've been working with the Citizens Advice Network in Scotland to create this central source of information, with everything from guidance on benefits right through to what you can do if you're worried about paying your mortgage or your rent. And just to let people know, to find your local Citizens Advice service, you can go to cas.org.uk/bureau, that's BUREAUX, and enter your postcode there. So Chris, to come back to you, this is kind of linked to what you were saying earlier about people on universal credit already were struggling badly, now struggling even more. It's one of those things where people who were maybe struggling to find a job last month are going to find it even more difficult going forwards. What do you make of the state of the benefits system and this announcement from Shirley-Anne Somerville about new support in accessing those benefits?
Well, I mean, the UK government, to my mind, has actually dropped the ball on this one. No surprises there. I mean, if you were to put me at the heart of the UK government when COVID-19 arrived, the first thing I would have said was give Scotland the powers of the benefit system and let them deal with the benefit system. That's one less thing off of our mind, and we can concentrate on other things. You contrast the new social security system in Scotland. Notice that I didn't say benefit system. The new social security system that has been set up in Scotland with dignity, fairness and respect at heart, which will treat everybody equally and fairly, is in stark contrast to how you are being treated by the Westminster government. My only hope is that the people who have been forced on to claim these benefits will actually have the benefit of experience to actually live an hour in an ordinary person's shoes, as they sit on the end of the telephone and listen to the questions that they have to go through in order to claim the paltry sum that the UK government give out for universal credit. We also have to bear in mind the fact that some people are not allowed to access universal credit, and I'm speaking for the people who are carers. Carers are actually barred from taking part in the universal credit platform, and many of them are reduced to having to claim income support, which is £86 a fortnight on top of the £264 that the UK government pay to a carer to look after a loved one. And I've done some calculating figures on that. That equates to £1.89 for 35 hours of care to look after one of your members of family, as an unpaid carer. And that, thankfully that's topped up by £400 odd by the Scottish Government. But again, that goes back to what I said earlier, that if we had a universal income, then we could do away with that system where everybody is treated on an exact equal level.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we have talked about. Is something that the Scottish Government and the SNP have been campaigning for. We will obviously keep watching and keep hoping that that does happen sooner rather than later. Moving on though, a number of short-term prisoners nearing the end of their time in custody are to be released early under measures designed to help tackle the coronavirus outbreak. The plan will help prison and healthcare staff to continue to manage safely all those who remain in their care during the outbreak and follows measures taken across the world, including elsewhere in the UK. Regulations will be laid before Parliament so that release can start from the 30th of April. The scheme will be limited to those sentenced to 18 months or less and who, on the 30th of April, have 90 days or less left to serve. The release of prisoners under the regulations will be subject to exclusions to ensure public protection, such as those who are imprisoned for life or with convictions for sexual offences, domestic abuse or terrorism offences. It's estimated that around 300 to 450 prisoners who fall within this category will be considered for early release. Other administrations in the UK and internationally have taken the decision to release prisoners in the context of the current COVID-19 outbreak, including France and the Republic of Ireland. And Sam, the Scottish Government has had a policy over the last few years of trying to reduce the number of short-term incarcerations, seeing that short sentences often do more harm than good in taking people out of their jobs, taking people out of their homes, causing all those other problems. But now, of course, the prisons are quite crowded and are becoming a bit of a hothouse for coronavirus infections, as well as staff being hit, which means that the prisons are struggling to maintain an adequate level of staffing. What do you make of this announcement that 300 to 450 people may be let out of jail in the next few weeks?
Well, yeah, I actually quite agree with it, because there's people in prison for what I would call softer crimes, who genuinely would probably, because sometimes a prison sentence doesn't necessarily solve the problem of why they are in prison. There's obviously other sex offenders, domestic abuse and other reasons for other crimes, but there's certain crimes, that a softer approach, and maybe, at the end of the day, each case has got to be evaluated on individuality. It's got to be evaluated on the support the person's got, out in the community, family support, if they need help from the mental health team, the social work, and things like that. Because even though the prisons are being crowded at the moment and there is a problem in terms of the prison staff falling ill and stuff, there's also outside as well, do we have the capacity? So they need to take these things into consideration. Do we have the social work capacity? Do we have the mental health team capacity? Do we have the support there? Yeah, it's one of those ones. Yeah, I agree with, but it's got to be done properly. It's got to be done safely for everybody, including the person being released from prison. Because the thing is, if people have been in prison, they've maybe lost contact with their family and things like that. So when they come out, they might feel a bit isolated. So these things need to be taken into consideration as well. So it's okay to say, right, we'll release them and it's ease up, the pressures in the prisons, but we've got to be careful that these people are going to be supported properly, and they're going to be able to access help and support, and especially whether it's male or female, they are entitled to that support, and at this moment in time, more so, because they're coming out to a different world from when they were in prison, with social isolation and all these things. So, I very much welcome the move, but there's got to be things. Each case must be looked at individually, and there's got to be support mechanisms in place for the people.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's not going to do MD any favours. It's not going to do the person any favours. And if it doesn't help them, if they're not getting the support and there's a danger, they will commit another offence and end up back in prison, which then just keeps clogging up the system. So they need to make sure that everything's in place to support these individual people. And we've got to remember they are people, not everybody, yes, they're in prison, but if they're coming out, there's got to be things there, there's got to be that support.
Absolutely.
It's a difficult one, it's really a difficult one, isn't it? It's one of these subjects that...
And Chris, what's your feeling about this?
Well, I think Sam's pretty much covered everything that I would want to say. I'm a great believer in social reform. If people have served their sentence and are ready to be reintroduced back into society, it has to be done obviously to protect people within the society first and foremost, but also to protect that person who is coming into that society. So the measures that Sam stated have to be clearly set out and adhered to. The last thing that you want to do is to release a person and they've got no home to go to. They've got no social. They have no social support behind them, and they fall through the cracks, and they end up reoffending again through possibly no fault of their own. You have to give them a sense of direction, you have to give them a sense of purpose, and you also have to make them feel valued. Sure. The whole support network has to be in place, long before you can even think about, will we release Joe Bloggs? He's only got 90 days to go. He's coming to the end of the term, and he was only in for, stealing a bottle of wine at Tesco's or something like that, then that's fine. The wider question about sex offenders, and people who are in for
more serious crimes.
Various things,
a different issue,
like child abuse and stuff like that, and all the rest of it. They quite clearly won't be considered on this level, and I think Holmes has pointed that out. To reassure everyone that will not be the case. But as I say, obviously, if the correct measures are put in place, then I have no reasonable objection against it.
Grand. Well, we do move on now to our last story, and social distancing regulations introduced to slow the spread of the coronavirus have been confirmed and extended to protect workers. Temporary regulations restricting public gatherings and non-essential business activity have been in force since the 26th of March. The regulations must be reviewed every 3 weeks and are kept under continual review by the Scottish Government. A number of amendments have now been made to protect workers and provide further guidance for people in Scotland. The adjustments to the regulations include formalising the 2-metre distancing rules to all businesses that remain open. Businesses that do not take all reasonable measures to enforce these rules could be fined or ultimately prosecuted. The legislation will also make clear that livestock markets and money advice services such as foreign exchange services can continue to operate, while holiday accommodation businesses can manage online and telephone services for bookings related to future dates. A technical change has also been made to clarify that burial grounds can stay open. And I mean, these are fairly kind of technical regulations, just tightening up some of the loose ends around these regulations. But Sam, it's good to see that they are being reviewed regularly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because the last situation we want to be in is, this lockdown and then that's it, there's no review given. But yeah, it's quite comforting to see that it's being reviewed. And yeah, I mean, the new formalising of the regulations, that's just, it's tying up the loose ends and things and just making it a bit more clearer to people, because I think for a while there, a lot of people were a bit unsure and not quite sure how social distancing worked and what it meant. So this is actually quite good, especially, I mean, I don't go near the supermarkets because I don't like supermarkets at the best of times. I generally try and use local butchers and things like that. But in terms of the supermarkets and things, from what I keep hearing from people, is that you queue up outside for your 2 metres social distancing and things, but once you get inside, there's a bit, some places are better than others, some places are really good that placing the 2 metre social distancing rules, but some of them it's a free-for-all once you get inside, and people are not themselves, and staff are not even basically adhering to these regulations. I know there was one shop that I was in last week. I did go out and go to one shop, and and like that, it wasn't a big shop. It was a medium-sized shop. It wasn't a supermarket. And like that, I was standing outside waiting in the queue. They were letting one in as one left. But once you were inside, there was no social distancing amongst the staff or the customers, and it was a bit kind of confusing in the sense to say, well, what was the point in everybody standing outside doing the 2 metre social distancing? So this kind of formalises it and maybe kind of gives people a better idea, and maybe also it gives kind of businesses that are still open a wee kind of kick up the backside to say, right, we really need to be doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed the same thing at supermarkets myself. Chris, I'm very sorry, but we are just about out of time, so I can't come to you on this one. I'm sure you'll survive, though. I'm sure you'll be back on with plenty to say very soon. But we would, as I say, that is the end of the show. We'd love to thank you all for joining us at home. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, whether you think we're a partisan hobby blog or not, we would very much welcome that support. It's only through your contributions that we can keep going here. So if you are able to support us financially, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month can make a huge difference to what we're able to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. As we've talked about at length during the show, though, we do understand a lot of people are really feeling the pinch just now, though. So if you're not able to support us financially, then please do help us out by doing a wee bit of marketing for us, whether you're a national news journalist or just an ordinary punter. You can follow us at Broadcast Scot. On Twitter, you can find us on Facebook, and then you can share the shows around, let people know what we do here at Broadcasting Scotland, let them know why you watch the show, what you get out of it, and hopefully, we can spread the word a wee bit wider. We would also, of course, like to again thank our friends at the Scotsman and the National for mentioning us today. That was one of the best bits of publicity we've had in a very long time. And just finally, before I go, the comment about it being a partisan hobby blog, and I know I'm going to get pelters from our producer Linda for saying this, but this is not a hobby for her. This has literally been her life for several years now. She has thrown everything she's got into making Broadcasting Scotland happen. People like me, people like Chris, people like Sam, people like Gordon, and the other presenters, the other guests that we have on here are all doing it as volunteers as well. But for Linda, it's pretty much a full-time job. She has thrown her heart and soul into this, and I don't appreciate people referring to it as a hobby. It's not. The intention is for Broadcasting Scotland to be a fully professional, full-time, full-service broadcaster for Scotland. That's the goal. We're not there yet. It's going to take a long time to get there, but with your support, whether it's financial or through just watching us and spreading the word about us, we are continuing to build. We are adding new shows. We've had the music show on a Saturday night, which I don't think is partisan in any sense. Sam's afternoon show will be starting very soon, and I don't expect that's going to be heavily politically slanted. The goal of this is to be a broadcaster like any other, except better. That's the point, and that's what we're aiming for. So if we were able to get 35,000 people to sign up, giving £5 a month, which is less than you'd spend on a BBC licence fee, we could employ 40 people full time here, running a full spectrum professional news organisation, as well as producing other kinds of shows to produce a full spectrum of broadcasting every day. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to achieve. And I just wanted to make that very clear. But that is all we've got time for tonight. So once again, thanks very much to Chris McCusker and to Sam Payton for joining us. I'll be back again tomorrow at 7 with Scotland at 7. But until then, thanks very much for joining us. Good night.